The Human Perspective. Chapter 1. Where it all starts. Is there anything new we can learn from the old? Is there any merit to ancient text that we did not extract or understand already? These questions were always part of philosophical conversations, and it is believed to be worth asking by all philosophical standards. We are currently living in very peculiar times. The endless quantity of information available replaces the wisdom of the old, giving rise to the age of relativism felt all over the Western world. The Bible is one of the oldest and most read books in the history of humans. It has been religiously adopted by an extensive part of the world population and has been translated into all possible languages. Throughout history, many streams have been created based on the interpretation of the stories told by the Bible. From Judaism to Christian Catholicism, through the Kabbalah and Christian Orthodoxy, each gives his own interpretation of the text. While reading many existing interpretations, I realize that all have something in common. They all have a priori assumptions about the stories. They approach the book from a very specific point of view. They all start from the definite assumption that God and the belief in God are the primary purposes of the text. For all of them, the existence of God is absolute and cannot be questioned as such, creating interpretations based on a religious belief, one that frames their thoughts and understandings of the texts literally. The delicacy and necessity present when approaching the text can be seen in many philosophers' writings. God, as an entity, was always there, a taboo that wasn't challenged for hundreds of years. It is understandable as ignoring the presence of God or hinting at the idea that God is not relevant to the stories in the book was considered blasphemy with horrible consequences. More recent interpretations, such as Jordan Peterson's interpretation in his book, Maps and Meaning, focus on the symbolic aspect of the text, opening a new door into a world of interpretations unrelated to religion. But even in this case, Jordan Peterson, being a self-declared Christian, makes his work unique, but still based on the fundamental approach to God. I believe there is value in all interpretations, and many of those attempts give us meaningful explanations of the Bible. The book has a lot of meaning and is one of the foundations of society as we know it today. Judaism and Christianity are the foundation of Western culture, and they built the world and its values as we know them today. As such, the Bible, with all its parts, is inevitably an important part of the West history and culture. Creations get interpreted differently based on the epoch of their beholder. It is not uncommon that over time, art will be taken out of its context. As time passes, new and unthinkable interpretations allow humanity to discover something new about itself. There is tremendous value in investigating the old. The survival of any art form over time shows its value and universality. I believe that any interpretations of the Bible that help humanity learn a universal truth about itself and/or promote unity, peace, and a better society are welcomed, needed, and positive. In this book, we will approach the first 4 stories of the Bible, including Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Noah, and the Babylon Tower. The approach chosen for our investigation will ignore the text's prehistoric symbolism and religious aspects, hopefully revealing a new angle to the stories we all know. The lessons we will learn are related to parenthood, adolescence, decision-making, and centralization of power. This book does not try to contradict or diminish the importance of any stream of religion or alternative interpretation of the text. Oppositely, I genuinely hope and believe this investigation will be taken as complementary. The mental exercise of addressing God in the Bible as a representation of a power that is beyond human understanding is worth taking. By doing so, a new examination of the text is possible, allowing us to explore the possibility of new messages missed by the orthodoxy. I believe the conclusions of our investigation will be relevant to all humans, regardless of time, space, race, and culture. This approach will hopefully allow young people to find a lost fascination in the scriptures. History can be seen as cyclical or linear. Different religions had this concept integrated into their fundamental approach. Christianity is a clear example of linearity, as each human is born, dies, and continues forward toward eternity. Buddhism takes the other approach, presenting the cyclicality of life with the idea of reincarnation. We will discuss later the effect of such ideas on how we read history. At this point, I will say that I find that the correct approach is based on a mixture of both. While humanity is built one on top of the other, humans do not change. The human essence is and always was the same. Sigmund Freud said once, "History is just new people making old mistakes." This notion is as old as we can remember ourselves. It is the essence of philosophy and the reason for its importance throughout human evolution. Looking as far back as we can, it is easy to see how the names and the tools change, but human behavior stays the same. It is precisely because of that that we need to cherish and learn the old texts. They have many answers we have forgotten, and many lessons that can guide us as individuals and as a society. The Bible is a historical book. It has been passed on vocally through generations before being written down. To better understand the book's messages, the story's antiquity needs to be considered. Ignoring this aspect of the story or reading it based on our current standard is problematic. It will be equal to reading Plato without understanding the circumstances of its time. Stories were meant to teach universal truth to future generations. They were bound to the limitations of their time. Reading the ancient Greece philosophers and their approach to reality, I noticed how controversial and meaningful was the subject of art. One of the major debates in their period was the role and origin of the Greek tragedy. Its origin has been addressed in Aristotle's book Poetics. His observation is that tragedy is as ancient as humanity. Its origin, the word itself, and the concept are a matter of discussion also in our current age. Tragedy plays an important part in human culture. It is one of the most ancient forms of art. It survived the test of time, holding the secrets of human perception, emotion, and development. The current definition of tragedy by the Oxford Language Dictionary is as follows: an event causing great suffering, destruction, and distress, such as a serious accident, crime, or natural catastrophe. A play dealing with tragic events and having an unhappy ending, especially one concerning the downfall of the main character. The second definition is of importance to our investigation. Tragedy is concentrated on events and downfalls, presenting us with life events we can all connect to, allowing us to learn something. Greek tragedy is believed to be based on myths passed on orally from generation to generation to teach us something important from archaic times. Combining the two definitions brought me to think about the Bible differently. I came to believe that it has a lot in common with the Greek tragedy. In the way I understand it, Greek tragedy shows its audience the worst turn of events. It presents a situation that all humans are familiar with and turns it all wrong. Doing so allows us to learn something important and make us fear the pain of acting similarly. Not surprisingly, the first 4 stories in the Bible are tragic, from punishment to murder, separation, and the extinction of the majority of the Earth's population. The stories seem to be unconnected to the rest of the Bible, and most of them could have been completely erased without changing the importance of the book and its story. The Bible, in its main part, describes the story of the Israeli, starting with Abraham and forwarding on. The story can be seen as a historical account of a nation. Judaism has taken the Bible at face value and read it as a commandment, while Christianity, due to its philosophical and cultural history, considered it a tale. Unlike other stories, Genesis can be seen as a story of revelations and enlightenment of the human as an individual and a species. The lessons that can be taken from those stories represent the ultimate foundation and truth that apply to humanity, regardless of time and space. The structure and order in which the first 4 stories have been outlined reveal from the start the way each human evolved and how we, as a society, came to be. After a long reflection on the scriptures, it seems clear to me that all these stories present a clear and evolving message, one that is there to teach us lessons fundamental to each person, family, and society. Stories are human-made. They are created by and for humans. No story can exist outside of the conception of humans. As such, any general description of reality cannot be other than the description of the human experience in the world which we call reality. Moreover, it can be said that everything that existed before the capacity of a human to experience it is, by itself, unknown and irrelevant, as it is beyond the human capacity to comprehend. If true, the first story of creation can be seen as a general description of the story of the creation of the inner cosmos of humans. All stories have a beginning, and so does any culture. Many stories have been created over the centuries to describe the origin of existence. The idea that the Genesis story is just another one of the stories describing the creation of the universe does not make it justice. Other stories of this kind typically describe events that happened without any connection to humans or a long time before humans arrived. The stories of titans or creatures that split and created the world that we know it do not involve humans as part of their stories and do not relate to the human experience as a microcosmos. The story of creation mentioned in the Bible is inseparable from human existence. It is described in steps that coincide with the development of human perception, making it different and unique. To fully understand my approach to Genesis, I find it relevant to develop a fundamental concept. God can be seen as an all-capable form residing above all creation. Alternatively, it can be seen as the unknown inside of each of us. The idea that our own existence is driven by a voice and an impulse that is foreign to us has been discussed by many philosophers over the centuries. Psychology by itself represents the practical research of this fact. I believe each human reading these pages has experienced his own inner voice, disturbing thoughts and impulses, and I do not find it necessary to investigate this point deeper. Human life can be seen as a process of revelations and inner learning, while many people refer to it as one process of learning the outside world. I will argue that the outside world directly reflects each person's inner world up to a certain limit. Humans do not have the capacity to see the outside world as a whole. Due to our mental limitations, our ability to focus, process, and understand the world around us is limited. Much research has shown it. The most famous of them all is the invisible gorilla experience made by Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris, in which they demonstrate our incapacity to see obvious placebo is another proof that our conception can affect the physical world and change our inner cosmos. I will recommend reading The Expectation Effect, written by David Robson, for a better understanding of the subject. As we will see, God, as presented in Genesis, can be seen in some parts of the stories as the inner world of humans, the description of God as an existence that is everywhere and nowhere, one that knows everything but does not share it all, one that has all the range of the human emotional spectrum and speaks directly to the protagonist, and only to the protagonist, of each story. This line of thought brought me to understand that God can be seen as the subconscious, the shadow we all have, and explain what we call intuition toward the world in the human experience. While some people will see the statement above as blasphemy, I will argue the opposite. Seeing God in this light does not contradict the idea of the power of the unknown, the role that it plays in our life, and the severity of the punishment we experience when defying its rules. This approach reinforces the omnipotence of each human in his own world and his connection to the universe as a whole. This way of seeing God in no way claims that God does not exist. Oppositely, it affirms a God who is an inseparable part of human existence. It can explain why humans always naturally lived with various versions of God. Moreover, the idea that God is inseparable from humans, as it is a force we all live with within ourselves, can bring us to a meaningful conclusion. The pursuit of God's understanding is a pursuit of self-understanding. This knowledge is inseparable from the human experience. As such, the death of God, described by Friedrich Nietzsche in his book Thus Spoke Zarathustra, is not different from the end of self-examination and self-observation into one's own world, its connection to reality, and the search for meaning. In the following pages, we will investigate the meaning of Genesis based on the above-mentioned approach and try to develop a new understanding of the universal meaning of the first 4 stories. The English version of Genesis is influenced by the Christian religion, adding to the text some ideas that do not exist in Hebrew. Our investigation will be done based on the Hebrew text, and I will address the differences between the 2 texts by pointing out where some sentences and ideas do not exist or need to be added in one of the versions. As we are trying to extract truths about the world we live in and humanity as a whole, ignoring the meaning of the differences between the 2 versions will not affect our investigation. Genesis chapter 1 will not be covered in this book, as I don't believe the story falls into the description of tragedy. As a story of creation, it seems it serves 2 functions. The first is the creation of the stage necessary for the stories that follow, and the second has to do with the mental and sensory evolution of each individual from the moment of his creation. While much can be said about the first story, as it is mainly based on symbolism, a separate investigation will be made separately.